Chabahar Port has long been positioned as more than just another maritime gateway for India. For exporters and logistics service providers, it represented something rare in this region, a relatively direct yet predictable route into Afghanistan and Central Asia without having to depend on Pakistan or any of the congested transshipment hubs. But today, Chabahar is no longer just a strategic conversation. It has become a supply chain question, one that's shaped by uncertainty, sanction risks, and changing commercial behavior. In this video, we're not going to talk about whether India should or should not stay engaged at Chabahar. Instead, it looks at something far more practical: how exporters experience uncertainty and how Chabahar compares with alternative routes in terms of cost, time, and risk. Let's start with why Chabahar mattered in the first place. So, geographically, Chabahar sits on Iran's southeastern coast with direct access to the Gulf of Oman. From an exporter's perspective, its real value lay in what came after the port: road and rail connectivity into Afghanistan and onward to the Central Asia, as well as the potential integration with the international north-south transport corridor. Now, for Indian exporters of pharmaceuticals, food grains, medical supplies, machineries, and consumer goods, this route promised a shorter transit time and lower overall logistic costs compared to the longer sea routes via the Suez Canal or complex transshipment heavy alternatives. In theory, Chabahar cut the transit time to parts of Central Asia by almost half and significantly reduced logistics costs. Now, that promise is what made it commercially attractive. So, what changed now? In recent months, uncertainty around the Chabahar has grown. This uncertainty is driven not just by port infrastructure issues, but by geopolitics, particularly sanction related pressures and changing diplomatic signals, and the cautious behavior of banks, insurers, and shipping lines. In logistics, uncertainty itself is a cost. So even before routes shut down or agreements change, supply chain reacts. Freight forwarders start building buffer, insurers reprice their risk, banks slow down trade finance approvals, and exporters quietly explore alternative corridors. So what are those alternatives? For most Indian exporters, these are three broad options if Chabahar becomes less reliable. The first one is routing cargo via Gulf transshipment hubs such as the UAE or Oman, followed by onward sea or overland movement. This option is operationally familiar, but it comes with longer transit time, higher terminal handling charges, and exposure to congestion at major hubs. The second option involves using other Iranian ports and inland routes. While feasible on paper, these routes face similar compliance and insurance challenges and often lack the same level of operational clarity exporters need. The third option is longer, more complex multimodal route combining sea, rail, road through multiple Central Asian countries. Now, these tend to increase documentation complexities, border delays, and coordination risks. Now, let's compare these options on three dimensions that exporters care about the most, which is cost, time, and risk. Starting off with cost. So, Chabahar, when operating smoothly, remains one of the most cost-efficient routes for specific westbound trade lanes. Alternative routes typically add incremental cost at multiple points. That means longer sea legs, additional transshipments, higher insurance premiums, and increased inland transport charges. Now, individually, these costs may seem somehow manageable, but when they're put together, they can push land cost up by 10 to 20% or more depending on the cargo type and destination. For exporters working on thin margins, especially SMEs, that difference can determine whether a market remains viable or not. Next is time. Now, time is not just about speed, it's about predictability. Chabahar-based routes were valued because they offered relatively stable transit windows. Alternative routes often add anywhere from 5 to 15 additional days in transit. Those extra days translate into higher inventory holding costs, longer working capital cycles, and greater exposure to demand fluctuations. For pharmaceuticals, perishables, and just in time supply chains, that delay can be commercially damaging. Now, to the most underestimated factor, the risk. Geopolitical risk does not hit supply chains evenly. It will first show up in insurance exclusions, banking hesitancy, and contractual fine prints. But then, when routes are exposed to sanctions ambiguity, even permissible trade becomes harder to execute. Letter of credit take longer to approve, insurance premiums rise or coverage narrows, shipping lines quietly deprioritizes lane that appears uncertain. So large exporters can sometimes absorb this friction, but smaller exporters often cannot. Over time, these uncertainty concentrates trade among fewer players, reduces route diversity, and weakens competitiveness. So, what should exporters and logistics service providers do? Panic. Well, that's not the answer. And neither is waiting. This is the moment for scenario planning. Exporters should actively compare routes based on realistic cost and time models and not assumptions. Contracts should include rerouting and force majeure clauses. Trade finance agreements should be reviewed early, not when shipments are already delayed. Logistics service providers, meanwhile, have a critical role to play, helping customers understand trade offs, designing multimodal alternatives, and communicating risk transparently. The larger lesson here goes beyond Chabahar. Supply chains value clarity more than optimism. Even if Chabahar remains operational, the period of uncertainty alone is enough to reshape routing decisions, pricing models, and exporter behaviors. So, for Indian exporters, the real risk is not just losing access to a port, it is underestimating how quickly uncertainty can erode cost efficiency, reliability, and competitiveness. And that is why Chabahar today must be viewed not just as a strategic asset, but as a live supply chain risk variable. Now, if you found this video useful, please drop us a like and subscribe to our channel. Do not forget to hit that bell icon for more interesting stories like this. Until next time, stay curious.